mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice conversation. Open your eyes, your mind, your heart.
In reaction to the pandemic, many parents are considering the option of homeschooling, and they have lots and lots of questions if it's right for their children. We're joined by Kelda Poynot, a Lafayette, Louisiana-based homeschool consultant. Kelda, I know you've been bombarded with a lot of questions. Welcome to Choice Conversations.
Thank you.
Before we get into the types of questions and how you can help families, how did you get interested in the whole idea of homeschooling? How did that come about?
When my oldest, who is now almost 25, it was the weekend that he turned a year old, I went to a workshop, and I was at the time a full-time school teacher, and I had been a school counselor during, even before that. And so I went to this workshop and I sat in on it, and I walked out of there convinced that I needed to homeschool my son. And it was all about homeschooling, and I really didn't even go for myself. I went for my sister-in-law. And when I walked out of there, I felt like I had been to a tent revival. I was a complete convert. The women that spoke there were very eloquent and just made it seem like a something that I could do on my own.
That's so interesting. I covered years and years ago, I used to do interviews about homeschooling, and there were lots and lots of questions, and people had their opinions about it. What's the difference between homeschooling and distance/virtual learning? Because since the pandemic, a lot of people are using the terms interchangeably, but
Right.
what are the differences?
Right. Homeschooling and distant and virtual learning or distance learning, they're very different things. Now, as a homeschooler, I might choose to have online coursework or maybe enroll my children in some kind of a virtual learning experience. But homeschooling is where parents register with the state. In Louisiana, we have to register with the state, and we say that we are taking the responsibility for schooling our children. So we don't have any, the government or the school system or the state doesn't have any say on what our curriculum choices are. They don't give us any money for anything like they do to the schools. There's just the families have taken the responsibility for educating their children, and they have the choices to be able to, decide how that's implemented, what curriculums they choose, how they learn, how best their children learn. So distance learning is what they're looking at now, is that, okay, so they've all been in public or private school, and now those children are because of the situation, they have, since the spring, they have been home, and some schools have provided instruction. Some schools have not, because they just don't have the resources. And then now they have come up, and for a while Lafayette Parish has had its own virtual school, but it's still part of the Lafayette Parish school system. And the state for years has had its online virtual school as well. So, but you're still tied and affiliated and enrolled with the state and with the parish. And so homeschooling is very different from that. So does that answer your question?
So when you say, Kelda, take the responsibility, what does that really mean? Because some people, when they hear that, they think, oh, you're the one who has to teach the whole time. But what does taking the responsibility mean?
That means that I am now kind of like the principal, or I'm the one in charge of making sure my children get everything that they need in the school year. So if you're looking at elementary grades, they're gonna need those core subjects, those 4 core subjects of English and math and science and social studies. And then as they get older, and then when they get into the high school, middle school and high school years, you're going to be looking at those high school credits and what's going to, if they're college bound or if they're military bound, or whatever their goals are, is how to best equip them for those goals. Now, you can hire tutors. You can have people online teach your child classes. There are free programs online. There are many, many resources. Your library is a great resource for educating your child. And so, you're taking the responsibility to make sure that your child is getting everything that they need educationally. And you're not relying on a school or on that year's teacher at a school to provide that for you. You're not paying for private or parochial schools. You're taking all the responsibility, both financially and physically, to make sure that your child is getting the best education.
Because a lot of families learn that this can be hard. This is hard work. What's
This
a
is
good
hard work.
fit? It is hard work. How do you know you're a parent, you want to homeschool? How do you know it's the best fit, or what's some things that you should think about when you're making your decision?
Well, it needs to be the priority. You know, it kind of needs to, like for us, it just developed into a lifestyle. This is just what we did. In the beginning, we kind of took it a year at a time. And then as my oldest approached middle school, we had to reassess again. Is this really what's best for us? Is this what's going to move in that direction? In the case of my oldest, he wanted to go to high school, and so we found a good fit for him for high school. And so there are other opportunities that came along. My other three behind him said, no, we want to continue to homeschool for high school, and that's worked for them as well. But it does have to be a priority. As far as, is it right for my family? Right now, I think that a lot of families are asking that question because they're looking at what's being offered to them from the schools, and they're saying, okay, we're going to go AB days. Your child might need more concentrated instruction than every other day, even if they have assignments in between. Maybe you have a child that can't attend to a computer screen for as many hours as they want you to log on and be attentive. That's very difficult for a child not to have some adult or some somebody there to kind of redirect them, get them back on task, especially young children. I just don't believe that they need to have that much screen time. So there's so many factors that are being weighed right now. The other factor that I'm looking at is, okay, we get all into school after Labor Day, especially the public schools. Some other schools have already started, and we get into this routine, and suddenly schools close again. Where are we going to be again? We don't know. We don't know what the future holds, and there are so many families right now who are fearful of the future. They're unsure of what. Is this going to cause gaps in their child's education? How can we supplement? How can we give them the best possible? So to me, I always kind of feel like if you kind of really have that strong nudging in your heart, like this is like a inside your body kind of feeling, like I just don't know that this is where my child needs to be, then you're going to be looking for solutions to that. And homeschooling might be one of the solutions for families to look at. So, is it right for them? Sometimes you don't know until you get started. And you might have to make some changes and change your way of thinking about what education truly is before you completely accept what it could be for your family.
What about resources? I know you're responsible for your child's education, but what types of resources are available?
Oh gosh, if you Googled homeschooling or curriculum right now, your computer would blow up. There's so many resources out there available. It's very intimidating. What I usually tell parents is to look, especially in the elementary grades. Let's look at those 4 core subjects. We need to read, we need to write, we need to do math, we need to kind of know our community and history, and we need to understand the world around us through science. So that is pretty broad and open, and we have so many resources available to us. Like I said, I usually start at the library. I find a math curriculum that will fit maybe my child's needs. It could be computer-based, it could be, workbook based. They're just different ways to do that. But I encourage families to keep it as simple as possible because they need a lot of, especially right now with the way things are and the unsurety of things. I would say let's make it as simple as possible and to just cover those core subjects to the best of our ability and read an incredible amount with our children and gain knowledge in a variety of ways. So as far as resources are concerned, we have the library, like I said, we have great online instruction if necessary, and we also have just any curriculum. And I mean, you can just Google curriculum and find something, honestly. it's not that hard to find the resources. And once you're kind of in the homeschooling community, and there are many Facebook pages and many groups, and I'm sure you know somebody who homeschools if you're searching, and you can say, hey, what do you think would be a good fit? And that's what I help families do as well. I do consultations, and we sit down and we kind of say, well, here are my children. These are their grade levels. This is what I'm curious about. This might work well for my family. I love it in the elementary grades for science and social studies because it's wide open, and we can just pick so many things that they're interested in, and how much more learning happens when our children are engaged and a subject is more child-led.
What about testing or test taking or even recording grades? How are you assessing the progress of your child?
Well, if you're using a curriculum, they have that built in. The testing, like end of a chapter or end of a section, there are tests built into almost every curriculum out there. So you really don't have to rethink that or reinvent that wheel. That's already been done for you. As far as recording grades, we are not required to record minutes or grades or anything like that with the state. And there are also options that you can standardize test your child. That is definitely an option. Or you can forego the testing and just promote your child based on their success, based on, their completion of, if they completed third grade math, you can be assured, a third grade math curriculum, if they're reading on a solid third grade reading level, I can assure you that they're ready for fourth grade. And so, because it's already built in for you for that.
You mentioned that your son wanted to go, I would imagine, to a traditional high school after being homeschooled. What advice would you give parents who child may say, okay, yes, we did the homeschooling thing. Thank you, mom and dad. It was great, but I want to go to high school with my friends or others. How do you maneuver that?
Well, it is up, first of all, you prepare them well. You make sure that you've covered what they need by grade levels. And so you've had some strong foundations built for your children. There are also some, usually it's at the discretion of the school to take in a child who has been homeschooled. So there are assessments that they take. Since it was going to high school, at the end of 8th grade, he took his LEAP test, with public school kids for the school that we were zoned for. I called the school board office, made an appointment. He arrived, he took the test like all of the other 8th graders did. And based on that 8th grade LEAP score, he qualified to go to high school. He chose to go to the Early College Academy that's at the community college here in Lafayette. And so that was a really great opportunity for him to get into that program. It was the second year that it had been available to us in the parish. And so that was really an exciting time for him. But every school gives some form of an assessment. So even if you're pulling your child out this year to homeschool them, just for this year, just like, let's just get it normal again. And you're and a parent is they are going to, when you decide to put them back into school, they're going to assess them somehow. It might be with a standardized test. It might be end of course exams, just some way that they're going to assess that child to make sure that they are ready for the next grade.
Well, there's always been a lot of concern or discussion around socialization of a child, that homeschooling is not going to prepare them to socialize with other children. Is that still a relevant argument and discussion point all these years later and with more experience with homeschooling?
Well, okay, you see the smile on my face. The first question, I had a very dear friend, she's still my dear friend, from high school, and she was starting, I was the school teacher and I was a school counselor. And so I was very concerned about this, right? And so she tells me that she and her husband have decided to homeschool their son. And I was like, well, what about socialization? That was the first words that came out of my mouth. Not, oh, how interesting, oh, how cool. Thankfully, when I was looking into homeschooling, she was the friend I called, and she's like, you're going to be fine. But socialization, what is socialization? Let's think about that. Socialization is learning to act in a way that is acceptable to a certain group. All right. So socialization says that I can get along in my family. Socialization says I can get along at school, I can get along in the community. I know the rules, and I can adapt to those rules and play by those rules. There's probably a lot better definition than that in Webster or on dictionary.com or something. But it's basically our ability to function within society. That is true socialization. So if you ask a homeschooler about socialization, I had 4 kids. We had plenty of socialization. We don't live in a cave. We don't live in a hole. We don't live, far out in the middle of nowhere. So our children were constantly around people, and they were around people of multiple ages. So if you think about what the school systems do, and they say, okay, all kindergarten age children are in this classroom. They're learning to function in a kindergarten classroom. They're not learning to function in the rest of society. They're learning to function and socialize in their little society. But if once you're out of school, our society, you don't just get to hang around people that are your age or in your grade level anymore. You're around older people, younger people, you're around, children. You're just, have you learned true socialization if you've only been around your classmates your whole life? Can you speak with adults other than someone who's in charge or who is your teacher? We were involved with church and scouts, and, my kids all took lessons in different times, and we've all had great interaction with a multitude of people. And most homeschoolers that you meet, they are very purposeful to get their children involved in activities that are outside of their home, playground dates and classes, and just in whatever they're interested in, music lessons or anything like that they have an interaction with other people.
How can parents who are seeing this, may have questions, may want to know more about it to find out what they're getting into, how it's a good fit, how can they reach you?
How can they reach me? Well, I have this spring, actually it's probably late winter before any of this even started. I had a friend who said, we were having a meeting, and she says, have you know anything about Patreon? And I was like, no, I know nothing about Patreon. What is that? Well, it's a subscriber account online, PATREON.com, and it's just /Kelda Poynot. And she says, you should really put your homeschooling information out there. For years, I've done workshops. I've done a Homeschooling 101 workshop. It's got 5 parts on Patreon. And then there's another homeschooling through high school, because that tends to be a very, it's high school. We don't know. Are we going to get our kids to be able to go to college? Are they going to graduate? Like all these questions that come out at the beginning with the Homeschooling 101, and then it seems like we have a whole different, group of questions when we get, as our children approach middle school and high school, because we want to do them, we want to give them the best opportunities. So I began thinking about that. And then when the kids were, what was that, Friday the 13th, and the schools closed in the state, and I began receiving phone calls after about the 2nd or 3rd week, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're not going back to school. What am I doing? And many of these children, they had no schools that were giving them supplemental in education at that point. Like they just had nothing. And so I began making videos just to say, hey, this is what you can do with your children at home right now. And so I just called it home education, and I thought it's good for supplemental education for the summer, supplemental education even, and right now it's great because it's like AB days. What are you going to do on the other days, And so when I started making videos, thanks to my young adult children who helped me set up a YouTube channel, and then I began those videos, and that grew into what I call Hey Miss Kelda on YouTube. Hey, comma, Miss Kelda, Kelda. And I have I've been doing vlogs and just short answering questions. So, can I, one of my questions and I've taken these questions from people in my life, and it's like, okay, I failed miserably at this whole quarantine schooling. How could I possibly homeschool my children? Questions like, is it expensive? How, and all of these are resources on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in, "Hey, Miss Kelda," and I've already released 11 questions. So this week will be the 12th question. So,
And this is
and
membership
then,
based, or is this one membership based?
no, this is not membership based. This is free YouTube. There you go. The workshops, the Homeschooling 101 and the Homeschooling through high school, are through Patreon, and those are subscription based. And it's $5. You can get access to those videos, but I kind of have to pay them to host it. So I kind of have to charge, for
Yeah,
that. I
a
also do
nominal fee.
consultations. And even though it's a subscription, you can cancel at any time. So you can pay the $5, watch all the videos, jump off. But I also have built in that we can have consultations, or if you have questions to submit, that I can answer for you. So there are other tiers on Patreon that give you access to me differently. I also on Facebook, I have Facebook Kelda Poynot author, because I am a published author. I write fiction and nonfiction, and so those resources are available. I post everything on Facebook initially there. With anything regarding homeschool, I put it on my author page on Facebook.
Well, as you said, there are lots and lots of resources, and you are a resource as well. We thank you for being on the show with us today.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's a pleasure. I know that this is a time that a lot of parents are questioning, a time where they're feeling, very insecure, and that's natural. That's a natural response to what's happening, and they want to do best for their children. And so I think that whether it's me or not, I'm sure that there are other homeschool families out there who would embrace these families and say, "Let's get you through this next year. Let's get you even through this semester," and work forward. The last thing that I'd like to say is that regardless of what their schooling looks like this year, that if you read with your children, if you just don't feel led to homeschool, but if you read with your children every single day, their education is going to be enriched and supplemented. And I just believe that regardless of what they're experiencing and just the insecurity of their routines, that I think if we can kind of bring it back down and go, we're going to do math and we're going to read every day, and you will be pleasantly surprised at how much that enriches any school environment.
Great advice. Again, thanks for being with us, Kelda.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining us for Choice Conversations.
Open your eyes, your mind, your heart. Let's have a school choice